Our final set of Ace Specs for this year have been revealed. Surging Sparks will be giving us probably, I think, the most Ace Specs we have seen from a set so far. I'm pretty sure the first few sets of the year gave us 5 or 6, and then I believe Shrouded Fable only gave us 3, and now with Surging Sparks we will be getting a grand total of 8 Ace Spec cards. Yes, 8. So this video might end up being a bit long, we'll see, depends how good these cards are. I may have a lot to talk about, or I may have absolutely nothing to talk about. So in no particular order, let's begin. In fact, let's actually begin with a reprinted Ace Spec card. That's right, we have another one besides Master Ball, and which one is it? Super Scoop Up Cyclone, I think that's the other one that's been reprinted. But now we have a third reprinted Ace Spec, being a Scramble Switch. This card reads that you can switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon, then you can move as many energy attached to the old active Pokemon to the new active Pokemon as you like. So this basically allows you to switch your active Pokemon with a benched Pokemon, so it's a switch, but you then also get to move all of the energy off of the active Pokemon onto this new benched Pokemon as it goes into the active. A very interesting ability, but the question is it going to see play? And to be honest, I'm not sure if it will. It depends really on the deck. I'm looking back at the era in which it was used, which was the black and white era, and it was only really used in a couple of decks. It was mainly used in plasma decks alongside Deoxys EX, Thundurus EX, and Lugia EX, because you had access to obviously like plasma energy, prism energy, and blend energy, so you could move them between your Pokemon, because back then their attacks did cost quite a bit. It saw play in a single Yveltal Garbodor deck, and it also saw play in a single Primal Groudon deck. And that's about it. Back in the day, it didn't see a lot of play, and it could see play in our current meta. It highly depends on the deck. A lot of people are saying it could see play in something like, you know, the new Pikachu EX, because you can make use of Magneton to attach all those energies onto your Pikachu, and then you can use Scramble Switch to put them all on a different Pikachu and then bring that one into the active. It's all up in the air, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think it's going to see play, mainly because every deck in the format has an Ace Spec that's pretty much a necessity for that deck, if not a requirement. You have Raging Bolt, which could pretty much use any Ace Spec. They mainly use Prime Catcher, but Scramble Switch could be something that they use. It's highly dependent. You know, you could use it to switch all of the energy from an Ogerpon to a different Ogerpon, or maybe onto a Raging Bolt. You can maybe switch the energy from one Raging Bolt onto another Raging Bolt, because they do have a pretty high retreat cost, and the deck does play quite a few switching cards. Charizard can pretty much use any Ace Spec it wants, really. There's no limit on that. Plus, you don't really need to use Scramble Switch, I feel like. Terrapagos, I'm not really sure on that one. Regidrago is another one where Scramble Switch possibly could be used. If one of your Regidragos is about to be knocked out, you could Scramble Switch all the energy into a different Regidrago. Lugia pretty much has to use Legacy energy, so it can make use of, you know, those other non-colourless Pokemon that require energy. Dragapult requires Sparkling Crystal, so it can attack for 1 energy. Then you have all the other decks like Palkia, which can pretty much use anything, plus it doesn't really need a lot of energy in order to attack, and it has that V-Star power to recover back free energy, so it kind of doesn't need Scramble Switch. We'll just have to see, because we will be getting quite a few new decks when Surging Sparks come out. We'll be getting Pikachu, maybe a Hydreigon deck, all these other different types of decks, and obviously decks we have in the format will evolve, so we'll just have to wait and see if Scramble Switch will see its play. Because back in the day, again, it didn't really see much play, but our meta and format is a lot different than back then, so there is a possibility it could see play. Next up is another energy card called Rich Energy. It says that as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides colorless energy. When you attach this card from your hand to a Pokemon, draw 4 cards. Not gonna lie, pretty bad. It probably won't see any play considering we have much better Ace Spec energy cards, like I mentioned Legacy Energy, which counts as any type of energy, which is just infinitely better. You have Neo Upper Energy, which gives stage 2 Pokemon 2 of any type of energy, that's just infinitely better. Plus the ability only works when you attach it from the hand, so if you use something like Archeops, it's not going to draw you 4 cards because it was attached from the deck. It's not going to see play, genuinely not going to see play, at least in my opinion. I don't know, it could pop up in some random rogue deck, some random control deck, but I'm being honest, there are much better options out there than an energy that lets you draw 4 cards. There are multiple Pokemon in the game that let you draw cards almost every turn. Next up is Precious Carrier, which is probably one of the strongest ones in the set. It says, search your deck for any number of basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. So it's basically a Battle VIP Pass Buddy Buddy Poffin, but for any Pokemon, and you can put as many as you want into play. This card will probably definitely see play in stuff like Terrapagos and Palkia, because you want to flood your bench as much as you possibly can. Plus, all the Pokemon that you flood onto your bench are going to, be used later on in the game. Multiple Hoots, a Pidgey for Pidgeot, you could put on some Duskulls, you could put on some Terrapagoses and all that kind of stuff. You can basically just get your bench completely set up for the rest of the game, especially in a deck like Terrapagos, especially in a deck like Palkia, because they can make use of the Area Zero Stadium card, so you can have 8 benched Pokemon. So you can basically just get 8 Pokemon out of your deck and onto the bench, which, not only helps you for future turns, but it also helps thin out your deck so you are able to draw into other cards, and you're not worrying about drawing a random basic every now and then. So yeah, it probably will see play inside of decks that, love having a full bench, love flooding the bench. So yeah, that's one to keep an eye on when the set releases. And another one to keep an eye on is Perfect Mixer. I talked about this in my Celoredge deck review video. Its effect lets you take 5 cards from your deck and discard them, which is very good in that deck because that deck requires you to have energy in the discard, which helps power up your Celoredge's attack. It's also really good in just decks that like having stuff in the discard, for example, Roaring Moon and Ancient Box. You obviously have the Baby Roaring Moon, which gets more powerful based on the amount of ancient cards in the discard, so this could be a very good inclusion, letting you dump a bunch of ancient cards out of the deck and help fueling up your damage. Other than that, I can't really think of any other decks that like to, flood up the discard with a bunch of cards. Maybe Regidrago. You could grab out 5 Dragon Pokemon from your deck and just throw them into the discard so you're ready to use their attacks. Those are pretty much the only couple of decks that I can think of this card being useful in, but if we see any more decks in the future that like fueling the discard, then this card could be an inclusion for those decks. Next up is Miraculous Intercom. It says put 2 supporter cards from your discard pile into your hand. So it's basically a reprint of Versus Seeker, but you get to get back 2 supporter cards, and it's an Ace Spec, so you can only have 1. It is a very strong card because unlike stuff like Palpad, which puts them back into the deck, so now you need to get something like a Luminion or you need to hope that you draw into it. With this, you can just grab back any 2 supporter cards you may need and you can just use them right there and then if you are able to. However, again, I think there are much better Ace Specs in the format that do a lot more than this. Granted, it is very good, especially if you're a deck that relies a lot on your supporters, again like something like Raging Bolt, which really wants to use Sarda's Vitality every single turn, stuff like Roaring Moon, which again wants to use Sarda's Vitality. Basically, if you're a very supporter reliant deck and you want to, use your supporters multiple times, this probably could see play, but at the moment there are just better options, to be honest. It's still a good card though. And then next up is Megaton Blower. This card says discard all Pokemon Tool cards and special energy attached to each of your opponent's Pokemon and discard any Stadium card in play. A very, very strong card depending on the matchup. It's good into stuff, again, like Raging Bolt because they like to play Pokestop. They also like to play the the Ancient Booster, so you can get rid of those. Terrapagos, it's like decent because they play double turbo energy, so you can just get rid of those. Plus it's a special energy, so it's a lot harder to recover, and you can get rid of the Area Zero Underdepths. Lugia, it's amazing against because it just plays all special energy, So once your opponent has used a couple of Archaeopses to get loads of energy out of the deck, you could just play this, discard all of those energies, and depending on how many are prized, depending on how many are in the hand, depending on how many are left in the deck, could just be an automatic win. Other than that, it doesn't really do a whole lot against other decks, like discarding a tool card here and there, a stadium here and there, obviously a special energy here and there, isn't the best. It's mainly good against, you know, those decks that use a lot of tool cards, use a lot of special energy, use a lot of stadiums, which would be Lugia, Raging Bolt, or like any kind of ancient deck, because they're like using booster, any kind of future deck. It's a very specific card that is good against specific matchups, which means that it could see play depending on how the meta evolves over time. If we get more special energy decks in the future, if we get more decks that are more reliant on tool cards in the future, because Lugia isn't going to be around for very long, so I don't think this will see a lot of play since Lugia rotates next year, but obviously stuff like Raging Bolt will still be a thing, and if we see another type of special energy deck appear in the format and it ends up being, you know, the best deck, people could start playing this to help counter it. At the moment it is a very good card, but it is specific in, it's a specific counter against certain decks, and against any other deck it's not very good. You could probably get rid of a couple of tool cards here and there, maybe like 1 or 2 special energy. Other than that, it's decent, but not right now. Next up is Energy Search Pro. Search your deck for any number of basic energy cards of different types, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Not gonna lie, I don't think this card will see play. I guess it's meant to help the new Stellar Pokemon since they require 3 different energy types for attacks, but we have obviously Earthen Vessel, which can grab 2 energies and they can be of different types. You have Sparkling Crystal, which can just reduce the attack cost by any type of energy, so you can mitigate one of those 3 energy costs. Plus you obviously have any other type of card that can just search whatever you can. It's just not very good. It's not worth playing. Again, because we have other Ace Specs that do it a lot better. Sparkling Crystal can just reduce the cost, so now you can just Earthen Vessel for the 2 energies you need instead of Energy Search for 3 different energies. And there's also just better Ace Specs to play. Probably won't see play, to be honest. And last up is Amulet of Hope. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, you may search your deck for up to 3 cards, put them into your hand and then shuffle your deck. A very, very good card, as it can basically just grab you any free card you need. So if you're on a low hand size, or your opponents use something like Iono or Roxanne to put you down to a low hand size, you can just grab any free cards you may need to help re-establish your board or help you get back into the game. It could be a bit of a deterrent for your opponent from wanting to attacking, because they know if they knock out that Pokemon, then you're going to get a search for any free card you want. So it could help in deterring them from wanting to attack. Plus it is a tool card, so they could just Lost Vacuum it away. They could, you know, use Hyper Blower, whatever it was called, the one we looked at previously, Megaton Blower, they could just use that. Plus another thing to note is that it says if it's knocked out by damage, so any insta-kill attacks like, you know, Frenzy Gouging will bypass that, so you won't be able to search free cards, but it is still a very strong card. It could be used in pretty much any deck, really, mainly in control decks or something like that, as a way to deter your opponent from attacking, because if you do, you can just get any free card you want. Very strong card. We'll have to see if it does see play and what decks it sees play in, but it is a very good card. And in the right deck, it pretty much could end the game straight by itself, because you could just grab free cards and you could be like, okay, do this, do this, do this, I win. GG. Overall, just like previous sets, it's a very mixed bag of stuff. The only 2 that are just straight up bad, they're not going to see play, are Rich Energy and Energy Search Pro, but all the others are actually pretty good and could see play depending on how it evolves over time and what new decks we see in the future, how the meta evolves, all that kind of stuff. I definitely think Perfect Mixer, maybe Amulet of Hope, and possibly Scramble Switch will be the main ones that see play, and obviously Precious Carrier will see play in stuff like Rid, Terrapagos, Palkia and stuff like that. Overall, for this set, it's pretty good. I'd give it like 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. You have like a really good selection of Ace Specs, and then you have 2 that are just not very good. Probably won't see any play. Pretty good selection that players should be keeping an eye on. See how decks evolve, see what new decks pop up, see if these Ace Specs create any new decks on their own just because of how strong they are. And that is it for the video. That's it for actually the first year of Ace Spec cards. And for the first year, we've had, you know, some ups and downs. We've had some incredibly broken, powerful cards, and we've had some cards that are just not very good. But that's to be expected. Obviously, Prime Catcher, Reset Stamp, and Sparkling Crystal are going to be like the top of the top Ace Specs all the way up until they rotate. But maybe some of these new ones could sneak their way in alongside those three as some of the best Ace Specs that we currently have in the game. But other than that, I'd like to thank you all for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, all that nonsense. Let me know your thoughts on these selection of Ace Specs. Which ones will you be playing? Which ones do you think will be played in certain decks? Do you think that any of these will bring previous decks that saw no play up into competitive play? Do you think these cards will make any new decks just spawn out of nowhere? But other than that, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I shall see you in the next video, whatever that may be. Take care.